Welcome to Build. This is my intro. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yes. Welcome to Build. Today, my guest needs no intro.
Hello.
The OG, the uncle, DC himself, has finally joined the podcast. It only took me 30 episodes to get ready for this.
Make sure that you were prepared.
Yeah. I'm just going to get right into it.
Let's go.
The question of the day is, have you changed your stance on hiring PMs
Oh
and
my
MBAs?
God, no, I'm leaving this. Goodbye. Shut the cameras off. I'm going now. Oh my God, I
You
walked
can't
right
avoid
into
it. Yep, you did. You said you didn't want to look at the notes. It was the first thing on the notes.
This is called getting punked, right? This is like an episode of Punked. Have I changed my stance? So yeah, I became infamous because years ago, for many things, but like one thing I did was write a blog post, which I think still lives in Medium somewhere.
It does.
People like Maggie find it sometimes and then put it in my face.
Yep.
But I wrote this podcast about like, how did I frame the title? I said, basically my intent, it didn't come across. My intent was like that you don't need to get an MBA to start a business.
Right.
Or to be and then I said that, what did I say? Product managers. That I didn't want to hire product managers who were product managers, right?
Yep.
And I still stand by that, although obviously I have violated that many times now, because I think it depends on your domain. And so like I had this like argument one time with, or discussion, or virtual one, which is my favorite. That's what introverts are good at. With Josh Elway from LinkedIn, from Twitter, whatever, about like how I was saying like I didn't like hiring product managers because like it depends on your domain, right? Like so like for me, it wasn't a successful thing because most of them were coming from different domains, different contexts, and there was not a lot of things that were reusable, and everyone had a different definition of what a product manager was. And again, my context is I'm in Boston. I do a certain kind of thing, which is SaaS software. At the time that I was doing most of this hiring, there weren't people that didn't had that experience, and so I was like interviewing product managers who were worked in hospitals and worked here and worked there, and it was like there was no transfer. And Josh argued the opposite, which I totally understand. But his context that he was coming from is like, well, if he's starting a social network, then I should hire, at LinkedIn, I should hire people from Twitter and from Facebook. And I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But like, I don't have that, right? And so like, it depends on your context. And so anyway, that's one angle. On MBA specifically, have I changed? I have changed a lot.
Because you have three of us.
Oh my God.
Me,
Oh my
Will,
God.
and Maria.
So hardcore. Yes, I have. And I think, again, it depends on the context. And so when I wrote that, and I still believe it, is like, at the very early stages of starting a company, I didn't find it necessary to focus on someone with that skill set. Although we did hire Will, right? So I violated that. But as we scale up in our company, now I'm like, oh yeah, how do we hire lots of MBAs? Because like a lot of what they bring and their rigor and their skill set is totally applicable to this kind of stage of the business. Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
So it all depends. The answer is, I've learned over time, is the only answer to every question in life is it depends.
Yep, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that wasn't my real question, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah. My real question is, I want to get your advice on how we can be better product thinkers. I think there's a lot of things you can look up on the internet about tactics and frameworks and processes.
Yep.
But I feel like what I've been learning the most from working with you is how you think about product. So, like, what is your framework for making trade-offs between, things like doing research and shipping, adding new features, using systems thinking?
Yeah, that's a good question. Elias reminded me of something, one of my rants that I've had for many years, but I forgot about it. It's been so long since I've said it, yesterday, because he brought it up. And it was this idea of like, you're too young for, do you remember what No, he doesn't. He's too young.
Why are you looking
do you know what, like, does anyone know who's listening to this podcast what Mr. Potato Head is?
I had one.
Have you had one?
Yes.
Yes. Dan definitely doesn't know what Mr. Potato Head is.
I've seen Toy Story. I know Potato Head.
Oh, okay. That's the context. He saw Toy Story. That's how he knows.
Okay.
So Mr. Potato Head, when I was young, the commercial was on all the time, and we had this Mr. Potato Head. And it was basically a toy that is the shape of a potato, and then you take different things and you plug in the eyes and the hats and the ears and the whatever, and you create these different things. I find often, like, on your question about mental models and systems and when it comes to products specifically, like, that we are good at, like, creating Mr. Potato Head or Frankenstein. And often people, like, we're always saying, like, copy or emulate or use a model, use a framework, like, use it. And often the more technical you are, the more like a product person that you are, for some reason. Like, we like to, like, take parts of things, and we'll often say, like, oh, we're using this model, or we're emulating this existing pattern, or we're, like, copying this thing, and then when you, like, double click on it, it's like you didn't actually copy the thing. You, like, selectively took a bit that you liked out of it, and then you hide behind, not you, but, like, we all hide behind, like, oh yeah, we use this pattern, like this, we did some research and we use this thing. It's like, no, you cherry picked things out of it. And so, like, my advice to people would be, like, the benefit in using a model or using a role model or a mental model or framework is, like, actually use the thing. Like, actually, like, if you're going to bother to do it, use 100% of it. Don't try to, like, revise it. Don't try to make it better, right? Build on top of it is different than revising and picking pieces out of it. And so we often do this kind of, like, Frankenstein thing. Often it is when you're emulating a visual model. Designers are really bad at this too. So, like, they'll use something and they'll say, like, oh yeah, this is, like, just like this, and you look at it and you're like, this is nothing like this. Oh yeah, it's totally like it. Look at this button over here, and it's like, no, you took a button from it. Like, that's not the model.
What if you have, this is a situation happened last week. You have a role model. You have a role model. But then you have another role model where you like the visual styling.
Yes, yeah. That's
but the functionality and the interactions of one are good, but then the visual design is different.
Yes, that often happens. So if visual design, it depends on what we mean by visual design. If it's just like the skin of something or the aesthetics of something.
Yes. For this example, mostly that. Yeah,
that one's easier because then it's like, okay, you can use that aesthetic for it. But obviously, like, go for the aesthetic. But when it's like the experience, like the user experience and the way that it actually works, the interaction model, like that, you can't, like, cherry pick the interaction model here and then the pattern here.
Okay. And then I want to know specifically about systems thinking. I know that's something we have sort of talked about a couple of times. How should PMs be, like, when someone says you should be doing systems thinking, like, what does that mean for a product person?
This one's, like, a hard one for me to explain because of my robotic nature. I think it comes naturally, like, it comes naturally to me, and I'm confused by people who don't think this way, who don't think, like, logically. Like, what's his name? Gabriel Weinberg just wrote a book called The Mental Models, the big thinking book around mental models. That's not the title, but look it up. It's this big book, and it's about mental models. And I love it because it's about mental models and it's all one big book. Anyway, he wrote a book called Traction before, and he had a bunch of startups. He's the founder of DuckDuckGo. It's a privacy-focused search engine.
Got it.
Okay. Anyway, so I knew him from years ago. But anyway, he wrote this book. It's great. It's got this mental models in it. And I think, like, the one that's at the very beginning, which is, I think people often reference it, is just like, but never really, don't use it, which is just like first principles, like reduce things down. And he uses the old interview from Elon Musk and Kevin Rosen Foundation, which was like about lithium batteries and reducing it down to everyone probably knows this who's listening to this, reducing it down to the parts themselves and understanding what are the costs of the parts versus what are the costs of the sum of the parts today. And that kind of reduction, like going back, working like that, is something, like, I don't know, for some reason, like, comes naturally to me and certain other people, but isn't a common trait. And I think that's one that would be, when I think about systems thinking, I'd take it from that angle, right? It's not about applying. You shouldn't have to worry about all these different mental models. Like, the fundamental one is this first principle model of, like, what are the actual parts that are or Bezos would say, like, like, everything is up for grabs except for the laws of physics, right? Like, let's reduce it down to the things that are not changeable, and everything else, understand the parts that go into something, and then work up. So, like, a bottoms-up approach to stuff. I think that's how I would recommend product managers to think about systems thinking. Instead of getting wound up in all these different models, think about that first principle model.
Is there a book for first principles?
No, there isn't. I mean, Peter Thiel mentions it in his book. In this book, it's mentioned in there. And they all reference the same examples, right? The Elon Musk example, and there's a couple other examples. But I think it's just, I don't know, this is why it's like confusing. It's hard for me to explain. Someone should just write this. Often people, sorry to interrupt you, like often people use that frame, right? They say like first principles, but then like you dig in and they're like, what are you talking about? And they're not sure.
Because a lot of people talk about first principles, but then it's like, all right, I'm going to do first principles. And then they're like, just go all the way down to the first principle.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Just like reduce it to the parts, right?
I find that I see that in PMs when it's like they're making a choice, but the choice that they're making is not the real problem that they're looking at. And so it's like learn to step back. And I think Teresa Torres has this amazing like opportunity problem framework where it's like keep stepping back until you get to the one problem you're looking at and not this like weird feature trade-off.
Yes. So. It's almost, the first principles thing is almost related to like the 5 whys to me of just like keep asking why and reduce. I think, Elias, again, I'll mention him, like thinks this way, I think this way. I think we're also troublemakers, right? Like we're entrepreneurs, so we're default troublemakers, problem with authority, like we got all the classic traits. So we're always like why, and then come back to just like, some fundamental thing that the person assumed of like, well, we can't possibly change this. And it's like, why not? Let's change that thing, right? And that's like reducing it down. So reduce it always down.
Okay. So we're going to continue this discussion over on Insider.
Oh, Insider.
We are. But I have one last question for you.
Sure.
And this is from Tony. He wanted to know if you could ask Charlie Munger one question, what would it be?
Will you be my uncle? Will you adopt me, be my uncle, long lost uncle? That's a great. Thank you, Tony, for that question. What would I ask Charlie Munger? I think I would want to understand, and I don't know how to frame the question, but I would want to understand, like, obviously, like, he's got this way of thinking and this kind of things that he references all the time. But what was the inception point? What was the failure point? Or what was the thing that got him to start down this path? He always mentions like the failure and like got tired of failing, but like what was it that actually changed his way of thinking? Because there is, like, if you read all his stuff about him, there is a point where like he was more ego driven and there was some failure point. I don't know what the failure point is, but so I'd love to know like what was the moment of like transition to this way of thinking. Yeah,
that's a good one. All right, thanks. That is the end of the Build episode.
How do you get to Insider though? www.drift.com/insider and insider.drift.com. We'll continue this conversation.
Yeah, but we need some reviews for the podcast too. 6 stars. 6
stars only. Leave some reviews for Maggie. We're gonna do more of this on Insider, and Insider is this totally free community that we've created where we publish things that you cannot get anywhere else, and all you need to do is go there, sign up for a free account. That's it, and you can watch all these videos and watch Maggie drop science.
Yep. Thanks.